Rene DP on Forsaken, and it's a Western, so a very classical, traditional Western, and it's starring Kiefer and Donald Sutherland, and they were played with each other for the very first time, so it was an interesting project, and I got really interested in doing a Forsaken because I've always wanted to do a Western, and then this was the perfect opportunity. Well, it was kind of interesting because they've never ever worked with each other. And actually John Cassard, the director, told me an interesting little story that when he was sort of talking to Kiefer and Donald about the project for the very first time, it was kind of interesting. After like 4 hours of discussing the script, Kiefer came up to John and said, that was the longest I've ever been with my dad. So that was pretty interesting. It was kind of interesting. It was shot in Calgary, and it was shot in a western town that was already there, and we basically had all of our locations in that western town. Well, I've been always a big fan of the Lexa Arri camera, and that was pretty much my first choice and only choice, really. So Panavision Vancouver supplied me with that, and I basically went with zoom lenses for the most part. We basically shot two cameras all the time, and the formula was kind of get a lot of shots very quickly. So what I liked about the zoom is that we could change shots within takes. So from two different angles, we would do multiple takes, but changing the shots very quickly. It was all locations and interior locations on set, and there were a bunch of finished sets that we repainted and made it our own, basically. I think it was some other Yukon kind of street before, and we made it all Western. My lighting was with my gaffer, which I brought in from Toronto, so he and I go back, and we've done a number of shows together now. I went for a very naturalistic style of lighting through the whole picture. And so all the day interiors were lit from outside in, for the most part, with just a little bit of accenting of lighting within the set, smaller units, but mainly big units coming through windows. Night interiors were a little bit different, more source lighting from inside, whether it's from kerosene lamps or practical. It was all basically kerosene kind of lighting. Well, you can't do a good picture without a good crew, and I had JP Lockyer, who was my second unit DP, and Mike Corella was my operator, and as I mentioned, I had my gaffer, Dave Breeze.
Hi, I'm Francois Dagenais. I'm a director of photography, and I'm nominated tonight for the Lizzie Borden Chronicle. Lizzie Borden is kind of, they invented what happened to Lizzie Borden after the real story ended and she was acquitted for the murder of her parents. So it's basically a serial killer in 19th century, starting Christina Ricci, Claire Duval, and Carl Hauser. It was a mini-series. Each episode was an hour. It was for Lifetime Network and produced by Sony Pictures. Lighting and grips came from William F. White Atlantic. Camera was supplied by Claremont. We shot with a Sony F55 because it was a pure RAW, and it was 4K pure RAW, and because it was a Sony show, they were really used to the workflow of Sony and post-production. Shot with Cooke S4 that I felt was a bit softer, and I had a lot of Kino flows in terms of lighting, but a bit of everything. All kind of location. We use an old kind of convent as a location, as a studio where we built set in. But we used the base that was already there. So it was not a real studio, and we didn't want a real studio. We wanted a structure of an early 20th century, late 19th century building. Was a lot easier to look real. One of the big problems with period piece is if you don't buy the location, if you think they fake. So the great thing about shooting around Halifax is there's a lot of that kind of architecture and buildings that help it be real. So it was all location. We even shot in museums that were shot for the season. I had to remove some artifacts and shot in some of the rooms there and had to be very careful. The post was Sony Culver City, which is actually now owned by Deluxe. They wanted a more modern feeling for the show. They even used modern music like rock music, alternative music. So they wanted a look that will reflect that with a lot of flares. We were going in and out of lenses, a lot of slow motion, really pushed the contrast and a color palette a bit different than usual. And that was reflected in the editing, and that was reflecting in the choice of directors and in the choice of music as well. So it was that was definitely a challenge to just know how much you had to push stuff and exactly what was asked of you that was a bit unusual. One of the big things we did is we were the first from Panavision Canada to use the 4K Phantom Flex. And even if Panavision didn't do the show, they provide us with that camera. And we're able to do some great slow-mo scene with it, and that was incredible. Well, the person is the director of the show I'm nominated with, is Russell Mulcahy. They used to do a lot of the music video for Duran Duran in the 80s. And I was obsessed with one of his video, Wild Boys, that I might have seen when I was 14 a few hundred times. And I only told him on the last day of the shoot.